But Mr. Magnia, if I can bring you in on this, the fact that, Mr. Magnia, I want to talk a bit about the Palestinian prisoners who are in Israeli prisons. Before the beginning of this conflict, there were an estimated 5,000 Palestinians who were in Israeli prisons. Since the 7th of October, Israel has gone about arresting another 3,000 more. So, in total, there are over 8,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons at this moment as we speak. And the fact that 150 are to be released at this moment, the criticism is Israel is arresting more people than what it is releasing as part of this hostage deal. How do you read that?
This is an excellent point. In fact, there are 7,000 prisoners held by the Israeli authority, and among these there are 1,400 on administrative arrest. This is very significant because the Israelis are the only one who's still implementing the British colonial 1940s law that allow them to arrest any Palestinian without addressing any charge or informing the person what are the charges against him or her. And yes, indeed, they have arrested 3,100 in the last 40 days. However, the Palestinians are not looking at numbers, really. What they are looking is to push the message to the world so they can start acknowledging what's happening in Israel is not right. And this is why we have the UK foreign minister today, for the first time, saying what Israel is doing is unacceptable. What Israel is doing in the West Bank is unacceptable. The destruction is beyond what we can cope with. So there are voices coming out and saying to the Israelis, you have to stop and you have to recognize the Palestinians as a state, as it is recognized by the United Nations and the Oslo Agreement 1993-1995. And this series of violence and the continuous violence since 1948 cannot continue. Absolutely. So if the Israelis stop arresting, they will trigger another reaction from the Palestinians.
Absolutely, indeed. And Mr. Magnia, looking at the situation that is happening at this moment, there is a sense of deep angst and a lot of concern within the Israeli society, where people within Israel say that their prime minister, who calls himself Mr. Security, has failed in protecting the lives of the Israeli people. And they also are saying that Netanyahu has not shown the initiative that he should have in securing the release of the hostages, because there are reports in Israeli media, such as, for instance, in Haaretz, which say that Netanyahu had rejected this deal earlier, but later crumbled under pressure and agreed to this very deal. What do you think happens from here on? Because Netanyahu is clearly fighting for his political survival.
You have asked now the most crucial question that every single Israeli is asking today. How we can return to our settlements if we have lost confidence in the army and in the government? How we can return to the settlement in the south with the border with Gaza, and in the north with the borders with Lebanon, if there is no security for us? 150,000 tents were dressed in Eilat for the Israelis for the first time in their life since 1948. So, yes, this question is unanswered today by the government, and this is what is going to bring out Benjamin Netanyahu from the government and put an end to his political life.
Absolutely, indeed, Mr. Magnia. Do continue to stay with us, but there are some breaking inputs that have just come in, where there are reports that the Israeli police has now resorted to using tear gas at the Rafah prison, where the Palestinians are supposed to be set free as part of this deal. So at this moment, as we speak, even as we see the Israeli hostages being taken through in a bus through the Rafah border crossing and who've now been taken into the state of Israel, what is happening at this moment is that there have been reports of tear gas having been used on the Palestinians who had gathered near the Rafah prison awaiting for the release of the Palestinian prisoners as part of the hostage deal. These are the latest updates that have come in terms of what is happening in West Bank, where it was expected that the Palestinians will also be allowed to walk free. Now, Susan, if I can bring you back on this. Now, this is being called a ceasefire, but it is not a ceasefire in the sense that a ceasefire is understood. It is more in the nature of a humanitarian pause. And once this humanitarian pause ends, the Israeli military leadership has indicated that they want to target regions in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, such as in Khan Yunis, where the Israeli military leadership now claims the Hamas has its command center. But the Americans do not appear to be that convinced about this next step of the Israeli plans of what they want to do in the Gaza Strip.
Americans, first and foremost, Mohammed, are concerned about this war spilling over to other parts of the Middle East and U.S. troops ultimately getting involved. But they are in unison when they want Hamas annihilated. Unfortunately, the tactics of Hamas, and we just saw a recent video as early as today by Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh calling what Israel is doing a Holocaust, but on the other hand, calling on the Palestinian people to stay and shed blood, because that's the way they'll get the international community's attention. So it's a very peculiar situation for Hamas to use human shields and for Israel to try to move one way or the other to try to annihilate Hamas, but on the other hand, face the Arab world's condemnation about these humanitarian rights, and we see civilians really caught in this crossfire. The United States has in recent days called for a two-state solution, but ultimately it also doesn't support the fact that when all of this fighting is over, and if it is, for Israel to occupy Gaza. So, there are a number of nuances about what would happen later, but I think the most important thing that Israel and the United States are on the same page on is for Hamas to not, perhaps it's not realistic to see them annihilated, but to at least really shorten their lifespan in Gaza and around the Middle East as well.
Do continue to stay on with Susan. Mr. Elijah Magnier, if I can bring you in for the last word. At this point of time, it's really difficult to predict as to what will happen in this war. This is the first breakthrough that has happened, but still there is a lot that needs to happen before any kind of semblance of peace that can be established. But looking at what has happened today, there are reports that hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinians, they tried to go back into the northern part of the Gaza Strip where their homes are located, but they were stopped by the Israelis. 2 Palestinians were shot dead. At least 11 Palestinians have suffered some serious injuries. What do you think is Israel's long-term plan for the Gaza Strip? The Americans have said that Israel should not occupy Gaza. On the face of it, the Israeli leadership publicly says that it does not want to occupy Gaza. But what do you think is their actual real game plan?
There are 2 points. From the military point of view, the Israelis have been doing everything to occupy north of Gaza. This is why they cut it in the valley of Gaza in the middle and started to occupy part of the north. The most densely inhabited area has not been touched yet. Now, by a ceasefire for 4 days or 8 days, it puts the army in a very peculiar military position because they are open on their flank. They can be attacked in any street afterward. Hamas is reorganizing itself. But from the political aspect, it is again putting pressure on the government to say enough is enough. You've used more than 35,000 tons on Gaza. They have learned the lesson. It's not going to happen again. You've killed more than 14,200 Palestinians, and that is enough. We have to stop it because there are many humanitarian cases and violation of international laws and war crimes that have been committed.
Absolutely, indeed. And that, of course, is the crux of this issue, because the United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, has pointed out what has happened in this war is that the Gaza Strip has been turned into a graveyard of children. The carnage in the Gaza Strip is just horrific. And as we look at this very first images of a breakthrough, remember, this is just the first step. and we still do not know as to what is, of course, expected to happen over the course of the next few days. How much longer will this humanitarian pause last is something that we'll, of course, have to look at. Thank you very much indeed to Mr. Elijah Magnier and also to Susan Tehrani for having joined us on this broadcast. We'll slip into a short break. More updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned to WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.